It's my pleasure to welcome you all here today to the Herman Alfred Tyroler Distinguished Alumni Seminar. I'm Corey Calva. I'm the president of the Epidemiology Chapter of our Alumni Association, which is sponsoring this seminar. I wanted to tell you briefly about the Alumni Association and ways you can connect with us. So the mission of the Alumni Association of the Gilling School of Global Public Health is to connect our nearly 19,000 alumni with each other and to keep them engaged with the school and with current students. The association accomplishes this mission through various programming efforts, including career panels and networking events that take place across the country through various chapters. I think that one of the best resources we have here is the ability to get connected through Gilling's online community, which is called Well Connected. All students, alumni, faculty, and staff are eligible, and I want to encourage each of you to sign up. For students, you can use this platform to search for alumni, look for mentoring and advice, and you can connect with alumni directly on the site, which is listed here behind me. I've listed two people that can help you. One is Jessa Nelson. She's the Assistant Director of Alumni Giving Engagement and should be the point person for most of your questions on how you can best connect to the alumni. And I've committed to serve through 2020 and would value your feedback on how we as alumni might better serve the students of the epidemiology department at UNC. So feel free to drop myself or Jessa an email anytime. Transitioning to the main reason that we are here today. Pop you up here. The Tyroler lecture is an important tradition in the Department of Epidemiology, and we're happy to have you join us. Originally conceived of in 1996 as an award to honor a distinguished alumnus over the years, and with help of our alumni section, we're now emphasizing this as a special lecture. We welcome today Dr. Michele Forman, this year's Tyroler Alumni Awardee. We look forward to her lecture, which will begin in a few minutes. Before we start, I want to take a moment to pay tribute to Herman Alfred, or Al, as many of his friends and colleagues knew him, Tyroler. Al was a transformative influence on the field of epidemiology, beginning his career in the 1950s. His enthusiasm about epidemiology and his desire to harness this new discipline to improve the well-being of communities contributed to shape cardiovascular epidemiology, its missions and accomplishments as we know them today. As important is his history and legacy as a mentor, training a generation of epidemiologists. This is truly such a high value. The quality of his scholarship and his generosity as a mentor continue to have a profound impact on his colleagues and students. This program today celebrates Al Tyroler's life and his lasting influence on so many of us. With that background, on behalf of the Department of Epidemiology and the Epidemiology Chapter of the Gilling School of Global Public Health Alumni Association, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Michele Forman, winner of the 2018 Herman Alfred Tyroler Distinguished Alumni Award. Dr. Forman is a graduate of the UNC Gilling School of Global Public Health in the Department of Epidemiology, where she received her MSPH in 1974 and her PhD in 1977. Dr. Forman was nominated by Dr. Debbie Wynn and Dr. Melissa Bondi, two colleagues who have known Dr. Forman for many decades and have collaborated with her extensively. And their letter was really amazing. It was just a gushing letter, and one that I think we would all hope our colleagues would be willing to write on our behalf. Dr. Forman has been the head of the Department of Nutrition Science and distinguished professor at Purdue University since 2017. She is also a member of the Center for Aging and Life course, and prior to joining Purdue, she was at the University of Texas at Austin School of Public Health. Prior to that, the MD Anderson Cancer Center. She has also been an epidemiologist at the National Cancer Institute and Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, so she's been at all the major places in our field. Dr. Forman's research and scholarship is outstanding. Her accomplishments across her career fully embody the impactful and sustained epidemiology research and spirit of Al Tyroler that the award is intended to recognize. She has a very impressive record of publications, including more than 150 manuscripts in epi, nutrition and its measurement, human development, reproductive factors, and the relationship of these factors to various developmental milestones, such as puberty and long-term health outcomes, including cancer. Dr. Forman has a long record of using her epidemiologic research skills developed here at UNC for public and professional service. She's on the editorial board of several journals and has long been active in programs and on governing boards for public health and professional epidemiology associations. She has chaired the congressionally mandated Federal Advisory Interagency Breast Cancer and Environmental Research Coordinating Committee, and through Dr. Forman's leadership, the committee published an influential report that emphasized early life exposures to physical and chemical agents, childhood development, puberty, and other life factors and their effect on subsequent risk of breast cancer. How this knowledge could be utilized in the prevention of breast cancer, and how federal agencies could use this framework in setting their future research priorities. She's a well-respected teacher and is known as an advocate in the community. In short, she is well-deserving of the H.A. Tyroler Distinguished Alumni Award. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michele Forman back to UNC.
Thank you very much. I'm deeply honored by this award. And I wanted to just mention a little bit of a couple of anecdotes of my experiences here many, many years ago. Gerardo Heiss was in my cohort with me, and he may be able to elaborate on those better than I could. But I was one of the first trainees in the environmental epidemiology program. And Al Tyroler led that program for many, many years. He trained me for my Master's of Science in Public Health, and did so with an incredible articulation of the principles of epidemiology, such that any of us who got the MSPH with him were well grounded for the rest of our career in the methods of epidemiology. Once I finished my MSPH, which was on, by the way, on smoking and lung cancer in North Carolina, I then turned to a team of faculty members here, including John Castle, Sherman James, Ed Wagner, and Bert Kaplan for my dissertation. My dissertation was on the effects of the Great Depression of 1929 on hypertension in adulthood. And so that was the beginning of my life course research, which I continue to this day. John Castle spent a fair bit of time training me in social change and health, with that thread also going through my career. He worked on the paradigms and the hypotheses for my dissertation. Sherman James was fine-tuning the social psychological effects of hypertension and the John Henryism that he would then be known for at that time. Ed Wagner was my primary mentor at that time, because Ed was the person who could train all of us in all types of epidemiology and be embracing of us. And finally, the ever-present Bert Kaplan, who originally found me as a senior in college and got me to come here, was on my committee as well. So to all of these people, I bow. I'm humbled. These are my epidemiology mentors whom I had here, and they were titans in their own right. If you ever walked into the office in the department at the time, John Castle was to the left, Al Tyroler was to the right, and you felt their presence immediately. Being trained by both of them as primary mentors for me was extraordinary. So it was quite an experience. I will also say, as a woman, I was highly respected as a woman student here, and equal to men at that time, which was an extraordinary environmental exposure for such a young phase. So now I'm going to turn to my research lecture, and I continue to do life course research with that imprint here. Today I'm going to talk about facing obesity and comorbidity in mothers and offspring, a life course approach. I wanted to just give you a little bit of my life course of what happened once I left here. So I start with the emblem for the UNC, because this is my dissertation, Life Course Effect of Great Depression on Hypertension in Adulthood. And then I roamed, and that's why I call myself a semi-nomad. I roamed the deserts of the world in Egypt, Israel, Tunisia, and now in Lebanon, and previously in Arizona, looking at pregnancy and infancy, looking at nutritional effects during that time period and their influences in growth and development in children. And I turned to some randomized trials in vitamin A in mothers and children, and then was one of the illustrious PIs to the National Children's Study in the United States. I don't need to say more about that. But I did do a lot of formative research for the Children's Study in growth, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I now have again turned and kept on my dial the early life exposures. I add the epigenome to my research and risk of chronic disease. So that gives you a little bit of a picture of who and what I've been doing. Okay, So developmental origin of disease, a life course research. We all know David Barker stood on the podium and really announced this as the main area of a paradigm for research across epidemiology. I will tell you, before he did so, Eric Erickson and a lot of others should be named in honor of their research that went on. But David got on the podium and he made it present for all of us to hear. And so the developmental origin of disease basically says that in utero and early life exposures not only influences your risk of growth and influences your growth and development, but your risk of disease across the life course. Okay. So the important thing, though, is that an exposure at one point in time in life, such as an in utero exposure, might have an influence on chronic disease risk. But if you looked at that same exposure, supposing it's diet, on infancy and childhood, the timing of that exposure in infancy and childhood might not have the same effect on chronic disease risk. So timing matters. And I'll talk about this throughout the lecture. Okay, by way of an overview, I'm going to talk first about long-term research in the life course of preeclampsia. Then I'm going to talk about the obesogenic environment in utero and early childhood and how it influences disease across the life course. And if I get a chance, I'm going to talk about some new assessment approaches we've developed in recumbent limb in young children. Okay, so life course of preeclampsia. For many, many decades, women who were diagnosed with preeclampsia in pregnancy were considered to be rid of the disease once their pregnancy was over, once they delivered. But we know now from the research in Norway that I've done with the colleagues in Norway, as well as research of others, that that's not indeed so at all. It's not only so for the mother, but also for her offspring. And very interesting, one of the reasons why I got involved in life course research in preeclampsia was that we had some idea from some anecdotal research that a preeclamptic pregnancy could actually reduce your risk of breast cancer. And I'll talk about that research as well. Okay, so an introduction to preeclampsia. Many of you know about this disease. It's an equal opportunity disease, folks. Anyone, any race, any socioeconomic status can be diagnosed with it. 3 to 8% of women in pregnancy annually are diagnosed with preeclampsia. If you have preeclampsia in one pregnancy, you are at significant risk of being repeated and having preeclampsia in subsequent pregnancies. And the classical clinical diagnoses, and I will tell you the diagnoses and the parameters for preeclampsia change with us over the time, are diastolic hypertension and proteinuria. Severity of disease begins diagnosis in mid-gestation, which is 20 weeks gestation. The more severe the preeclampsia, the earlier the diagnosis in pregnancy. And those who are diagnosed before 34 weeks gestation are considered severe preeclamptics. Those diagnosed after 34 weeks gestation are considered mild to moderate preeclamptics. Okay, but preeclampsia is this funny disease. We don't understand its etiology even now, and I've been doing research in this for 40 years. It's a placental disease. It's a disease where there's shallow penetration of spiral arteries, there's ischemia, there's uteroplacental perfusion, there's the placenta itself, particularly the syncytiotrophoblasts, which is the maternal side, is very stressed, and indeed is arrested at a very early immature state. So in pregnancy, just as in carcinogenesis in the first trimester, a lot of the growth factors, VEGF, TGF-beta, and others that are upregulated to develop the placenta, has the von Hippel-Lindau tumor suppressor gene coming down at about 12 weeks gestation to downregulate once the placenta is formed. In this pregnancy, unfortunately, the placenta is arrested in an early stage, and this doesn't happen. One of the things that I was very interested in, and you can see the size here, by the way, of the spiral arteries, how smaller they are in preeclampsia compared to the healthy pregnancy. And that means that a lot of the nutrients and the oxygen that should come to the fetus do not get there. And in fact, the offspring has a lot of the blood shunted to the brain and heart for survival because of this inadequacy and the low oxygen tension in the spiral arteries. And because of this inadequacy of nutriture, and oxygen. A lot of the babies who are diagnosed with severe preeclampsia are actually small for dates, less than the 10th percentile of the birth weight distribution for gestation age of birth, and are preterm. They're delivered early. The severe preeclamptic is a woman who can be at very high risk of eclampsia. Eclampsia is the leading cause of maternal mortality across the world. The mild to moderate preeclamptics are a whole other different group of women. I'll present some data that actually indicates that I think they're a different disease. And they deliver babies that are large for date, greater than the 90th percentile of the birth weight distribution for